Hey everyone, in this video, I want to talk about ServiceNow just a little bit more. I know I've done a bunch of videos recently about ServiceNow comparing to Cherwell, um, ServiceNow, why it's similar to Cherwell. I'll leave those videos down in the linked down in the description below. But in this video, I wanted to talk about ServiceNow again in the context of the ITSM guide that we just recently released. Um, if you haven't seen that, I'll leave that link down in the description below as well. There's actually a playlist of a bunch of comparison videos between other ITSM vendors and Cherwell, specifically from the perspective of most of the people that we've worked with and are working with still come from the Cherwell background, right? Cherwell is going away at the end of 2026. Everybody has to move off to another platform. So we've gone through to some of those other platforms and just done a comparison of how similar or different they are compared to Cherwell on specific what we've called dimensions, specific aspects of the functionality of the customizability. Um, we didn't talk about things that didn't exist in Cherwell, so things like AI, machine learning, those sorts of things didn't really exist in Cherwell, so we didn't go into that. And one of the things that we specifically left out of the report was ServiceNow. That was for a few different reasons. One, ServiceNow wasn't at Service Management World 2024, and that report is specifically on the vendors and the platforms that were exhibiting at Service Management World 2024. Um, in part because I wanted to give more visibility into some of those vendors, being that some of them are newer, some of them are smaller, some of them are just less well known, and everybody has heard of ServiceNow, right? Everybody has heard of BMC, Avanti, especially if you're coming from the Cherwell background. You've heard of all three of those, and to a certain extent, you probably already know whether you're going to evaluate ServiceNow alongside, potentially other, newer, less well-known vendors. And then finally, uh, the third reason, those were the first two reasons that they weren't at Service Management World, and that most people probably already know if they're going to look at ServiceNow. Um, the final reason that we didn't include that is because ServiceNow is just so big. There's so much to ServiceNow, that really trying to compare it to Cherwell would be kind of interesting. And honestly, I was concerned that I would be able to find all of the functionality that I was looking for, based on, what I'd seen in the past, what I'd heard from other people, and uh, quite frankly, the opinions that people have about ServiceNow. Of course, since then, I've actually spent a lot of time in ServiceNow, mostly on the back end. We've been building our Cortex for ServiceNow product, an archival tool for ServiceNow databases, similar to Cortex for Cherwell. So basically, you can take a ServiceNow database, put Cortex in front of it, and you have visibility into all of your data. So I've had a lot of experience with ServiceNow from the back end perspective over the last couple of months while I was building out this report. So I figured I'd make this video to talk about how ServiceNow stacks up against Cherwell on some of those dimensions. We'll get into some of the ones that I don't really know the answers to. I still don't know what ServiceNow's functionality is like in those areas. Um, but we might take a look at the ServiceNow UI. I at least have it up on my screen, so I might share that as I talk about some of them. But we're just going to go through the different dimensions, and I'll give my opinion, basically in the spirit of the report, which again you can download from the link below. Um, one of the dimensions, it's actually the last dimension in most of the lists in the report, but you might be interested in using this platform if, and for ServiceNow, it really is if you want complete control, right? As I said in the last video, ServiceNow is really the only other platform in the ITSM world that is completely customizable. Everything is can be defined exactly to your liking, even to the point of what you would think of as the core objects, right? Incident and that sort of thing. Um, Everything is customizable. Um, and if that's really what you want, ServiceNow is the only uh, platform that really provides that. So with that, let's go through some of the other ones that are a little bit more concrete, and let's talk about them. So the first dimension was hosting. Now with Cherwell, you had an on-premise or self-hosted model. You could also run in the cloud or SaaS or hosted, whatever you want to call that. Vendor hosted or self-hosted is the distinction that I've started making. Um, Now, ServiceNow, I believe, was the first SaaS ITSM provider. Um, and they are still very much a SaaS ITSM provider, though I believe in the past you could run it on premise or self-hosted. That might still be the case. I'm not 100% about that, um, but they are very much on the SaaS side, right? It's really easy, in fact, to spin up a new ServiceNow instance. Um, Form customizability and um, of course object customizability. Uh, I'd want to say that's as good as Cherwell, except for the fact that the forms aren't nearly as customizable as Cherwell. The objects certainly are. You can create custom objects to your heart's content, but creating forms, you're limited to either one column or two columns. And I guess you have form sections that are kind of like form arrangements, and also related lists, which are not exactly the same as uh, the form arrangement tabs, because with a form arrangement tab, you could show the grid, you could show a single business object, or you could show that split view um, in Cherwell. Whereas in ServiceNow, you just get what in Cherwell was called a grid. That's it. Um, if you want to see a specific record, um, you have to figure out some way to do that as, I guess, a form section, probably. Um, if you know the answer to that, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I know there's someone out there who is a ServiceNow expert and they know exactly what I'm talking about, and they can say exactly what you would have to do in order to make that happen. Um, so that's forms and business objects or objects. Um, Now, automations, I know there's a way to do it, but I didn't really get into that in ServiceNow. So I don't actually know the answer to that. I can't give a score to automations. Speaking of which, I'll give all the scores at the end of the video. So if that's the only thing you're here for, go skip to the end of the video and you'll find out the scores. Uh, Authoring of automations, I believe that ServiceNow has added a no-code editor. I know you can absolutely write JavaScript and do a lot of automation that way. And you can see endless documentation on how to do that, how to deal with glide records, which are essentially business objects, business object records, um, and get, it's JavaScript. You can do whatever you want to within the system, and interact with the system through the ServiceNow API essentially, or SDK, whatever. I'm not sure what terminology they use, but you can write a ton of JavaScript. But I believe they've added a no code editor in one form or another fairly recently, within the last few years. Dashboards, something that I haven't really dug into, but I do know that all of the pages that you see within ServiceNow, like even let's just switch over to the demo screen. This page here, this is not hard coded into ServiceNow, the platform, as far as I know. I believe this is basically a piece of custom content that is defined in the database, and basically everything is. So this all menu even. Let's see, do they even have something called a dashboard? Self-service dashboards? Sure. There's all sorts of things. Um, let's just pick a random dashboard and see what pops up. I am logged in as an admin, so I think if I can edit this, I should be able to see a some sort of customizability. I don't even know what I clicked on, but it looks like there's something. So yeah, there is dashboarding. How you configure it, I'm not an expert. You'll have to ask someone who has done that in ServiceNow. But I'm sure there's a way. Obviously, there's a way. This is pretty custom, and it looks like um, you can do a lot of things. I can't imagine that all of these are like hard-coded widgets. So that might actually be something to look into. I'm curious now. I'm going to look deeper into this. Um, Email processing, like the email and event monitor. I don't really know. I haven't gone looking for that. Let's see. Um, email client configuration, email email accounts. This looks promising. So this is obviously a table. Uh, yeah, it looks like there is a way I can save an email account in ServiceNow. What I do with it, I'm not entirely sure. But it looks like it supports POP3, IMAP, and SMTP. And I don't know how I submit, how I configure monitoring to use this email account. Um, but I suppose that there's something along those lines. Um, so again, something I haven't really looked into, but probably something there. It wouldn't surprise me if it's not nearly as sophisticated as Cherwell's email and event monitor. Very few are. Most platforms typically just allow you to create an incident, maybe update an incident, um, add journals, email journal entries to an incident, that sort of thing. And now the final dimension that we reviewed is documentation. Now, in ServiceNow's case, there is a ton of documentation. Um, I would, I don't think it would be a stretch even to say that ServiceNow's documentation, quantity of documentation, is probably larger than everyone else's documentation combined. There is an immense amount of documentation from the developer forums, the user forums, the uh, actual um, like official documentation, and in addition to that, the developer site, which see if I can pull that up real quick. This is just a link to the developer site. Let's just go to developer. I can't spell developer.servicenow.com. ServiceNow has an entire developer portal, developer site. And I think this, aside from the fact that ServiceNow is probably the most similar to Cherwell you're going to find as far as a platform, being a platform is concerned, being a customizable platform is concerned. Um, this is probably the absolute standout feature of ServiceNow is that they have a developer site. They have a a guided pathway to learn how to build on ServiceNow, a set of tutorials, a set of certifications, some of which I think are even free. At least some of the learning pathways are free. The certifications might cost money, probably do cost money. ServiceNow likes to charge for things, but you can learn a lot about how to use ServiceNow, how to build on ServiceNow just by following their tutorials through this developer portal, developer.servicenow.com. I think this is phenomenal. I think this is fantastic. It's really well done, really well put together. Again, I've said in previous videos, the thing that ServiceNow has down is their execution, and this is a great example of this. If you want people to build for your platform, having a pathway for people to learn really quickly, really easily is the best way to do that. I mean, just by logging into this developer portal you can create a what they call a personal developer instance. So here, uh, I have my personal developer instance, and just because I logged into the portal, it spun up and it's online. So that's what I was showing in the last time I shared my screen. It was my personal developer instance, which stays around for 10 days as long as I uh, use it periodically. So I think it goes to sleep after a day or two. And as soon as I log into the developer portal, it spins back up. If I don't use it for 10 days, it goes away and I have to re-provision a new one. So it's kind of automatic, but those resources are available to me. I don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. I don't have to pay any licensing just to get access to the platform, just to be able to learn about it. Now, the downside of the quantity of documentation that ServiceNow has is there is just a lot of it, and it's easy to get overwhelmed or confused or find answers that relate to an older version than what you're running. Um, with the immense quantity comes decreased quality. Did I say that right? Increased quantity, decreased quality. So you kind of have to be careful about the documentation that you do find. If it's the official documentation and it correlates to the specific version you're running, you can be pretty confident that it's accurate. But if you're looking at a forum post, the developer um, forums, message boards, those sorts of things, your mileage may vary. It's like looking at Stack Overflow, right? And in fact, I think you can find some ServiceNow stuff on Stack Overflow as well. Um, there's definitely a huge community of ServiceNow developers, which means that there's a lot of community generated documentation of one form or another as well. Again, your mileage may vary. It might be accurate. It might be inaccurate either because it's just wrong or because it relates to an earlier version and the version that you're on does things a little bit differently. Uh, but there's an immense quantity of it. And that might not always be helpful. So if there's one downside, it would be that. It's just that you might find too many answers to something and they might not all be right. So with that, we've talked about all the dimensions. And now it's time to give each one a score. So hosting, I gave a 6. Again, because I believe there is a way you can do a self-hosted model, but it's not really what they want to do. They want to bring you to the SaaS uh, installation as much as possible because they are a SaaS company. Forms, I gave a 5, even though business objects are customizable to your heart's content, or their equivalent of business objects. Uh, the forms really are fairly limited in what you can configure, um, at least without writing a bunch of code or jumping through a bunch of hoops, right? The kind of the out of the box functionality, drag and drop, that sort of thing. Automations, I don't know enough about to give a score. But authoring, assuming that what I have seen about their no code automation builder is accurate, I think I can pretty confidently put that at a 5. It looked reasonably similar to some of the other visual editors that I've seen in other platforms. So not as sophisticated as Cherwell's one-step editor, but at least a step in that direction. So 5 seems like the middle ground. Dashboards, again, I can't give a score to that because I didn't really look into that. Email processing, um, that's still a big question mark, even with what I found, while I was recording this video. I don't really know. I'll have to go look at the documentation. Maybe there's a learning pathway in their developer portal that I can just pull up and uh, and see how that works. And then documentation, again, it would get a 10 except for the fact that there's almost too much. There probably is too much documentation out there. So I have to give it a 9 just because you're almost guaranteed to find something incorrect for something between all of the different places that you look. But with that being said, I really, really wanted to give it a 10 just because of the developer portal. I think if there's a platform that you want to feel um, I don't even know how to say this, but well, Cherwell had certifications, right? You could get an administrator certification, and for some of the other platforms, I think you can get like a similar sort of thing. ServiceNow, you absolutely can. It is definitely a developer platform. The same way you could get a Cherwell certification, you can get a ServiceNow certification. Um, Similar to the same way you can get certified in Salesforce or certified in AWS or Azure or something like that. ServiceNow is absolutely a developer platform from that perspective, um, and has the resources to go with it. Really fantastic resources. Yeah, definitely. If you're interested at all in learning about ServiceNow and learning how to for ServiceNow, go check out the developer portal, because uh, I think I think you'll have some fun, right? It'll be something that you can nerd out about. Um, yeah. So with that, that's pretty much it for ServiceNow. We talked about um, all the various dimensions that I evaluated all of the other platforms on, uh, and even dove into some of the highlights that I really think ServiceNow actually has. There are definitely some things that ServiceNow does much better than any other platform out there, possibly even better than Cherwell did them. Um, there's a reason that ServiceNow won, and Cherwell is not going to be around anymore, right? Even though I said in a previous video that Cherwell absolutely the superior technology. I think I'm still 100% confident in that. Cherwell was fantastic technology. Yes, it was not without its issues, but it was fantastic technology and far superior than ServiceNow. But ServiceNow is miles ahead of Cherwell for sure in execution, miles ahead of where Cherwell ever was in terms of execution, and miles ahead of many of the other platforms in execution. Right? ServiceNow is going to continue to win, uh, just because they are focused on executing for their customers. Um, whether you like to admit it or not, ServiceNow is definitely um, making it happen. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions about ServiceNow, let's be honest, I'm not the right person to answer them, but leave them down in the comments below. I'm sure someone will answer them. And if no one does, I will find someone who does know the answer. Um, I'm making lots of friends with folks in the ServiceNow community these days. So I'm sure I can find someone who can answer your question. Also know a lot of Cherwell customers, former Cherwell customers, and even people who are still using Cherwell are moving to ServiceNow for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned in this video, in the last video. Um, and uh, you might want to talk to some of them about why they chose ServiceNow over some of the other platforms, or how they're implementing some of the things they did in Cherwell in ServiceNow. Um, you can do that either through the Cortex users group. I don't mind if you talk about things that aren't specifically Cortex. If you want to talk about ServiceNow or any other platform that you're moving to, or things you did in Cherwell, that's fantastic. Let's talk about those in the Cortex users group. You can find a link to join that down in the description below. That's every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Um, you can also talk in our new community, which will be launching very soon. Stay tuned for that. It'll be a little Discord server where you can talk about anything Cortex related or anything ITSM related. Or if you want to schedule some time with me, there's also links down in the description below to do that. Shoot me an email, schedule some time on my calendar, and we can talk about ServiceNow, and I can help find you someone who is actually an expert at ServiceNow to help answer some of your questions. With that, I'm going to end this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any other questions you want me to answer about ServiceNow or any other platform, maybe a platform that I haven't reviewed already, go ahead and leave a comment down below or shoot me an email, and I'll check it out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.